All right, well, let's get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks for having me. My name is Danelle Mizuta, and I'm here today to talk about cognitive diversity and a strength-based perspective for neurodiverse learners. And it's kind of a mouthful, but I hope by the end of our time together today, you just have a better understanding of what cognitive diversity is, who would benefit from a strength-based approach from learning, and just having some new ideas on how you might go about some supports for your students in your classroom. So we all have learned how important social emotional learning is, and so I always like to start with a little bit of a mood check-in. So just take a look at this picture. It's called a blob tree by Pip Wilson, and it's just a fun way to check in with students or even colleagues, get a temperature check of the room. It's just a great way to kind of understand and better know your students. So I also wanted to share with you that I'll upload the slide deck in the app, I think. And most of my slides, if you see links or images, most of them are hyperlinked to the reference for information. All right, and you may have seen a bag of supplies in your row. So we're gonna do a little optional activity. It's called a flower petal activity. So this is very optional. But I just wanted to share, like, as a teacher who, some of us have control issues, I could have animated this slide and kind of just gone one step at a time to just do one petal at a time, or step one and step two. But I'm hoping also to kind of model strengths-based learning and just have us all consider the variety of learners that we might have in our classroom or in our space. So I want you to have as much time as you need for this activity. Some of you might feel more confident if you have all of the information that's needed before you start creating your masterpiece. And then others might benefit from doing this activity to complete while I go through my presentation. Sometimes it's helpful to have another task to do. And yeah, there's instructions in the bag, and I'll be showing this slide throughout the presentation, so if you need to refer to it. But again, this activity is completely optional, with hopes that you're willing to share your flower at the end of the presentation if you choose. So what you're gonna do is there are sticky notes inside the bag and some markers. You just wanna choose one sticky note, any color that you're feeling, and you're gonna wanna draw 5 petals as large as you can on your sticky note. And then for each petal, you just maybe represent however you want the following, right? So your favorite drink or beverage, your sign, subject in school, if you could be an animal, and maybe your dream vacation location. So, you know, you can draw, you can doodle, you can use words, phrases, numbers, shapes, whatever makes sense to you. Some of you might also want to see some exemplars. So I did this with some colleagues this past summer, and here are some examples. And I'm really focusing on this workshop talking about how great variety is. So isn't this variety great? And I also learned a lot about my colleagues as we did this activity. So, all right, so before we continue, I just want to help share the plan for our presentation today. We've already done the blob check-in and started the flower activity. And so for some learners, knowing what's coming next is really, really helpful to keep our anxious behaviors down. For me personally, knowing that I've already done a couple of the steps makes me feel like I've accomplished some things. So yeah, I'm gonna intentionally continue to try modeling some of this strength-based practice and behaviors during my presentation. So I hope it's working. All right, let's get started. So did everyone get to see Shelley Moore at lunch today? Okay, so I feel like she just primed me so well. Because I think it's safe to say that we can all see the value in diversity. And it's a great time right now to live in this world where diversity is celebrated and embraced. So when we think about cognitive diversity, I want us to think about, you know, the variety of ways that we think, that we learn, even process, or share our understanding of the world. And we just want to consider like why it's so important that we're able to do that and look at that as a positive thing. Because I think sometimes we often find ourselves asking like, why can't everyone just be normal? So it's really important for us to have these different ways of thinking and learning. And when I hear the term, it makes me think of learning preferences, like I'm thinking of Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. And the way that we as teachers process information might not be the same way that the students that we teach process information. It's going to be different from child to child. Our classrooms just include all different kinds of learners, behaviorally, emotionally, academically. So I want to show you this 90-second video from Amy Wilkinson on the need for cognitive diversity in the workplace. All right, let's see if it works.
I'm Amy Wilkinson. I've spent the last few years doing research on high-impact entrepreneurs. We hear quite a lot of conversation around diversity, and it's defined now as gender diversity or race diversity or ethnic diversity or socioeconomic diversity. I mean, there's lots of different ways that we talk about diversity. My real interest, and I think that the high-scale entrepreneur's interest, is around cognitive diversity. So it's not what goes on outside of the way we look or where we came from. I think it's about what goes on inside your mind and what kind of perspective do you bring to solve a problem. If you really want to crack a thorny problem, it takes a lot of different points of view. And if things are not really straightforward, you want to discover a new outcome, it takes building on each other's ideas. So cognitive diversity is about what goes on inside your mind. And different people will come with an engineering point of view or a sociology point of view, an anthropology point of view, a business point of view, a medical point of view. You know, they'll have different experiences, or they might be a divergent thinker or a convergent thinker, or they could be an introvert or an extrovert, or there would be a lot of different dispositions that would be a cognitive difference. And I think that's a big way that high-scale entrepreneurs are solving problems.
All right. Okay. So we often compare our brains to that of a computer, and I'm just wondering if that's actually accurate, right? So this biologist, Gerald Edelman, he stated that each individual's brain is more like a rainforest, like it's teeming with like growth, decay, competition, diversity, and selection. And I think that while many of us compare the brain to a computer, we know now that the brain has the ability to change and adapt, and we have the ability to learn new things. So what if we considered the brain to be less like a computer and more like an ecosystem or a brain forest, if you will? I'm going to be talking about one of my professors, Dr. Thomas Armstrong, who coined the term positive niche construction. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But he shares a different view of what mainstream folks consider like disorders by sharing that like these genetic variabilities don't only bring disadvantages, but they might bring advantages to the human population as well. So if you look at his quote on the slide, disorders such as autism, ADHD, bipolar disorder, and learning variabilities have been in the gene pool for a long time. There must be a reason why they're still here. And that was kind of really impactful for me. So we see the value in diversity, and we need cognitive diversity to crack those like thorny problems that we saw in the video. Then what is like neurodiversity, and where does that fit in? So we all know what biodiversity is. You know, it's just an understanding that there's a variety of species that inhabit the earth and the local ecosystems. And neurodiversity is kind of like a subset of biodiversity. That's kind of how I see it. It's a picture of Judy Singer, and she's the founder of the term neurodiversity. And what neurodiversity refers to is the limitless variability of human cognition and the uniqueness of each human mind. So I think of our workplaces, our families, our classrooms, they're all filled with neurodiversity. And because we have all of this diversity, it's really important that we consider how to create a classroom environment that could really reflect our teaching practices to be more inclusive. So let's take a moment to stop and think about our teaching practices. And I want us to think about if we've only been looking at student deficits, which isn't maybe allowing us the time and space to be able to look for some of the strengths in our students. So there's a 2-minute video. It includes an activity which requires you to practice some observation skills. If you've seen this video, please play along, and if not, I hope you enjoy it. Let's watch it.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball. The correct answer is 16 passes.
Did you get it?
Did you spot the gorilla? For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half miss the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game? Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold. When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events. And that's the monkey business illusion. Learn more about this illusion and the original gorilla experiment at theinvisiblegorilla.com.
It's a book now too, which is really great. Who saw the gorilla? That's awesome. I did not see the gorilla the first time or the second time. So I love this because I want us to think about like what we've been told or even trained to look for. I'm a special education teacher as well, so we're often trained to look for areas of need. And I'm not saying that that's, a bad thing, but then are we also missing like what we're not looking for, like the gorilla? It could be significant because, if we're only looking at what we are comfortable looking for or what we're confident in observing, I think we can miss so much about a student or even our classroom environment and our community. So what if we opened ourselves up, and looked for things that might help us understand our students better? What if we added tools to our teaching practice that would make the gorilla welcome in our classroom? I mean, if you watch the video, the gorilla didn't cause any harm, and he didn't even negatively affect the activity. So, what else could the gorilla have done to maybe even have enhanced the activity? We'll never know, right? But moving forward, we could think about, considering ways that we might have made the gorilla feel welcome or even use the gorilla's strengths to be an active part of the activity instead of an invisible one. And this is where that strength-based approach comes in. So, and then I think about us as teachers, what if we're the gorilla, right? What if the main part of our lesson is the gorilla and the students just miss it because they're looking for something else or they're seeing something different. And is that really the student's fault? It's really important for us to think about that. So we as teachers sometimes get stuck, let's see if this video will play, seeing only what we want to see or what we're trained to see, or even maybe what we're just comfortable seeing. And so it's important to consider that it's possible that our students might be seeing things differently. So if you look at this dancer, which way is she spinning? Which way do you see her spinning? Yeah. Or not, right? Might it be different from the direction that your students are seeing her spin, even though we're all looking at the same exact thing? Isn't that interesting? I look at this a lot. Yeah. All right, let's think of a few other kind of ways that we see things differently. Some of these are pretty popular. Do you see a duck or a rabbit? Do you see a tree or two profiles? We all know this one, right? Do we see a young or an old woman? And how many legs does this elephant have? And I think we all remember this. You know, I only can see white and gold. If anyone else sees black and blue, I don't understand it. So just some examples of, you know, what we see. It's our reality, and it still might not be what our students are seeing or what they're seeing in us. So it's just a really good way to kind of remember that. All right, let's do a quick check-in. How are we doing? Everyone doing okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down. How are your flowers coming? If you are willing to draw a flower, please keep at it. If you choose to create one. All right, so let's move on. We're gonna go on to focusing on the learning outcome. All right, so I'm talking about a strength-based approach, and it's critical to support our neurodiverse students that we focus on their strengths. But it's also important that we don't lose sight of like good, effective teaching. And so wanna ask ourselves, like, am I teaching often the way that I learned best? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that the students in front of me are gonna learn that way. So we really wanna keep that in mind. And I also want us to think about the point of our expectations or our learning outcomes, because sometimes we can create activities that maybe don't have guidelines or rubrics, or maybe the limitations on them are a bit much. So I'm gonna share a personal story. I think I can walk now can you hear me if I talk really loud? This is my son Mason, my firstborn, and in kindergarten or first grade, he came home with a white piece of paper with some instructions for the 100th day of school. And so the instructions were to work with your child and have them create a poster that represented 100, preferably in 10 groups of 10. So I was like, Mason, this is so great. Like, are you so excited? And he's like, this is so dumb. I don't want to do it. And so I'm a teacher. video of him explaining what he's going to do. So let's watch this video and see.
The aliens are on the car so they can try pop the things and the apples are on them.
Okay. What?
And the quarters, they're like rolling boulders.
Oh, rolling
And
boulders.
then they try and stop the tsunami.
Okay. So let's put the pennies where they should go, and then we'll stick them on. Where do you want them?
Yeah. All right. Okay, so as
Don't
teachers,
they,
oh, sorry. As teachers, like it's really important that we focus on the point of the lesson. So like this mama really screwed up, right? First of all, I did the first one for him. And just because the activity has lots of bells and whistles, it doesn't mean you're supporting your learners, right? It doesn't necessarily make it effective. And then what about these really restrictive guidelines? Because when I'm looking at the video of Nalu explaining the tsunami and stuff, like where did he ever mention 100 or 10 groups of 10? Like he didn't. Great story, but, and then like, you know, I'm human too. So like, I don't know if you heard my deficits-based comment about, because he said the pennies were quarters. And I was like, let's move the pennies, you know? So, so we're all human, okay? Yeah. So just thinking about cognitive diversity, right? It means that everyone interacts with the world in different ways. And I just think about the traditional education system. I think about what Shelley Moore was telling us today at lunch and how some institutions are just really designed for very few people. And, you know, there's often sometimes a stigma with learning variabilities or learning differences where people who think differently are looked down upon. And I just wonder if we as teachers can really help see the strengths in our students instead, and like really what the value of cognitive and neurodiversity could be, just to help kind of challenge the stigma. And I've talked about positive niche construction, and that's just another way to reframe our thinking. So let's take a look at that. So this is Dr. Thomas Armstrong's book, and he says people with neurodiverse brains can create special niches for themselves where they can be their unique selves. And so I'm thinking of like a person maybe with ADHD, and they require a job that like has thrills, creativity, novelty, right? Maybe like a firefighter or a paramedic, because you really want those people to know what's going on all around them, as well as what, you know, critical emergency needs to happen, you know, versus someone who might do really well in a 9-to-5 desk job. And that would be poor niche construction. So just thinking about how we as adults move through school how we can, and then hopefully we can create our own niche and find careers that really work to our strengths. And if you think about nature and animals and biodiversity, animals have been doing this like forever, right? So I think about birds building nests or beavers building a dam. They're basically modifying their environment to suit their needs. And, you know, we can make positive niche construction a tool to just really improve the lives of our students with autism, with mood disorders, with ADHD, with dyslexia. And I just think about these animals like they're creating their own least restrictive environment. And it's just really smart. It is a paradigm shift for us, though, to think about the strengths of neurodiverse learners. But what if we did start really speaking to our students' strengths first? So I just want you to take a look at this rose on the left, and maybe in your mind think of 3 descriptive words that you would use for this rose. Would any of you ever say that this rose has a petal deficit disorder? I hope not, right? Or that one of these children suffers from like pigmentation dysfunction. We would never say that, right? Yeah. So when I think of neurodiversity, I think of Todd Rose and the End of Average. He calls it natural human variation. Dr. Tetro's talk this morning just talked about how every single brain is like our fingerprints. They're all unique. They're all different. And I mean, just think about yourself, think about your friends, your relatives, like your coworkers, you know, we're all different. So if you look at the neurodiversity paradigm in green, it says no one type of brain function is right or best. Instead, ideal neurocognitive function is socially constructed, like other forms of diversity, right? Neurodiversity is subject to power inequalities, but it's also a source of creativity and empowerment. And so then I think about like your uncle who you know is going to cause a scene at Thanksgiving dinner, or your colleague that's always late to meetings, or your family member who has like the best mac and cheese recipe, but you'll never know the secret ingredient. And, you know, it's natural variation. And like, how boring would it be if we were all just the same and if we didn't have that? So that's kind of where this like shift for me helps, like in agreeing that we need a society, you know, where normal is natural human variation. It's evolution. Which brings us to the neurodiversity movement, which seeks civil rights, equality, and inclusion for everyone, regardless of our neurocognitive function. So I just think of, instead of us being afraid or threatened or negative about these neurodiversities, like, could we promote them as strengths? All right, so thinking about your class of students, there's likely labels, diagnosed or not, you're a veteran teacher maybe, so you probably are observing some things. And I'm just wondering if we can like engage in cognitive diversity like as a shift, right? Like what if we thought more about what was great about our students? So these are some characteristics of the challenges that students might have. But what would it look like if you got your class list and several students had all of these letters after their name? And instead of us thinking of all the extra work that we might have to do, we kind of shifted our mindset and said, oh, this is cool. Like, I'm going to have some kids who can really be creative or can really use their superpowers to help me in certain activities. I know we're not going to get there overnight, but it's a really good opportunity, I think, to just be open to shifting our mindset to a strength-based approach. And then this is just another really great graphic. Again, these are all hyperlinked in my slides, just on the benefits like associated with various like quote disabilities. I'm in grad school right now and my classmate has renamed his ADHD. So he says he has an interest-based nervous system. And he feels that that describes him a lot better and he doesn't like the label of ADHD. And so I just think it's really important for us to, you know, not only see the deficits, but also the strengths associated with these diagnoses. Okay, so let's look at the components of positive niche construction. So strengths awareness, instead of focusing only on the deficits of students, we can focus on what students are passionate about, their goals, their hopes, their aspirations. Positive role models, right? Students are influenced by the adults that they see in their lives. Learning about successful adults who have similarities to them can be very powerful and encouraging. Assistive technology and universal design for learning. I could do a whole presentation on universal design for learning, which is leveling the playing field, and assistive technology, which is great. Shelley Moore talked about that as well. Enhanced human resources, right? So building a rich network of supportive adults. We know that having 3 supportive adults whose students feel safe with at school is really important. And it could be not only the teacher, it could be the Lego robotics coach, it could be the librarian, it could be the school counselor. Strength-based learning strategies, so like innovative approaches to learning unique to their needs, right? So if they like music, teaching concepts with specific lyrics to like, you know, popular songs. And I put the quadratic equation to row, row, row your boat because I learned that in 10th grade from Mrs. Edwards. And I still know it now, but it's like a party trick because I don't know what the quadratic equation is for, but I know it. Because I can sing it to the tune of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. If you stick around, maybe I'll sing it to you later. Also, 3 is the magic number. My colleague reminded me it was one of my favorite songs of all time. Great way to learn the 3s. And then what's next? Sorry, affirmative career aspirations. Again, so encouraging students towards career aspirations that will suit and fit their needs, right? So thinking about students who have hyper-focus or a lot of energy where they might benefit from firefighters and paramedics, ER doctors and surgeons versus those 9-to-5 desk jobs. And then environmental modification, so thinking outside the classroom. And we're in Hawaii, so it's so awesome because we have opportunities, right, to go into the class garden, which is like project-based learning, right, or to take kids out on the track so that they can run or jump math facts or math problems. It's just a really great opportunity. All right, I don't want to gloss over universal design for learning because it is an approach to teaching and learning. Again, like I said, it levels the playing field. And for those of us who aren't familiar with it, there are 3 principles to universal design for learning. So engagement, representation, and action and expression. And I think, go back to thinking about my son's Lego creation. So, you know, if he was given an opportunity to represent his understanding of 10 groups of 10 with the Lego, that would have been great. That would have been kind of an approach of universal design for learning. I think about like universal design for learning, like planning a road trip in case of all the problems. And so if you plan ahead for all of the potential challenges, it doesn't matter like what the weather's gonna be like, if there's gonna be a detour or construction, or even like the irritating backseat driver, because you're gonna have been prepared for that. All right, and this just, you know, our words matter. And when we're thinking about our students and their labels, it matters. So it's another opportunity for us to think about how we use our words and if we shifted to a strength-based approach. And I just added this slide last night, and on the left, I'll give you a chance to read that. That just made me think about Shelley Moore, too, at lunch, talking about how it wasn't her fault. It was the school that wasn't designed for her. So that was really interesting. Yeah. All right, so beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and so is misbehavior. And we're conditioned to look for these things and these challenges that we have in class, but maybe what are we missing sometimes, right? So take a look at some of the different ways that we can label behavior. So you'll see a column that says flaw focus versus strength focus. And again, this isn't gonna happen overnight because we have all of our things, but it is possible. Here's one more slide. Again, these are hyperlinked. I'll share my slides. But just think about if any of these resonate with you, because words do matter, right? And as educators, it's important for us to reflect on what our internal dialogue is and how we use our words to think about our students. I think we can actively reflect on using a strength-based approach. And when we do, we're modeling that for our students as well, right? So regardless of if they're neurodiverse or not. And so in the end, the students are then able to also develop a more positive sense of self and awareness. All right, so in the bottom left-hand corner, I just want you to take a look at that, because now we know about positive niche construction, the power of our words, a strength-based approach to teaching and learning. So just think now, if you want, what kinds of activities, resources, and projects can you include that align to your students' talents? Thinking about that. Because if students have the opportunity to engage using their talents and their strengths, where it's aligned to kind of their unique brain wiring and the way that they learn, I just think the students would be more willing to participate in the activity, and they would produce some really cool things that would also make you as the teacher look really, really great. So for me, it's I think it's a win-win. All right, we're almost at the end. How's everyone doing with their flowers? If you are making one, I encourage you to kind of put your finishing touches on it. And so, I want us to consider how a field of all the same flowers is nice, but a field of diversity is also beautiful. Natural human variation is required, so I would love if we could embrace it. So I'd like to kind of end with this quote: the neurodiversity-inspired educator will have a deep respect for each child's unique brain and seek to create the best differentiated learning environment within which it can thrive. All right, so if you've done your flower, there is a Padlet and a QR code on the bag. And if you'd like to contribute to the field of diversity on your way out, we have, I have butcher paper, a field that is waiting to be filled with some diversity flowers. So on your way out if you're interested in that. And thank you so much. We made it. So we're all the way at the end. I just want to share a couple neurodiversity happenings. I think for a lot of people, cognitive diversity and neurodiversity is kind of a new thing, but it's actually been here a while. It's still new to me as I'm learning about it. But there's actually a really rich community that's doing a lot of really great things. So last year, this program just concluded. 17 school teams, public, private, and charter in the state of Hawaii, participated in this cognitive diversity program. And so it was four sessions where we talked about understanding cognitive diversity. We shared a suite of tools, some resources that teachers, teaching teams could use to focus on strength-based approaches. And it just ended in May, and it was really, really great. And it's exciting for me because it means we're on the right path. And if you're interested in more, we're looking to continue the program. So if your school maybe didn't know about it or it wasn't a good time, maybe in the future you can join us in another session. And I wrote an article in AMLE on taking a strength-based perspective. The Stanford School of Medicine has a neurodiversity summit every year. It's this weekend. I'll be talking about UDL on Sunday. And there are neurodiverse individuals who have started creating their own advocacy groups. So it's also really cool to hear from first-person perspective. But what I would like to share, if you haven't been in room 311 yet and met Susanna Johnson and Josh Rapun and all the other people on the What Schools Could Be platform, I would encourage you to join that platform. It's become international at this point, which is really great. And Susanna and I have just created within the platform a cognitive diversity group. So a great opportunity. I'll put my slides in there to share and talk about and collaborate with each other on strength-based approaches. So if you're interested in learning more, again, my slides will be shared, and these are all hyperlinked, but these are some really great reads on understanding neurodiversity and the superpowers and the benefits associated with them. And I'm done. Thank you so much for coming.